in conversation with Keredwin Jacques. What is your deaf story, and how does it relate to your creativity? How do you feel about a Deaf Creative Manifesto for Wales, and what do you think should be included within it?
When I was about a year or so old, I had scarlet fever and was in isolation hospital for many months. The secondary effects of the scarlet fever with mastoid infections, burst eardrums must have been incredibly painful for such a small child. And of course, in those days, parents were not allowed to be in isolation hospital. They apparently could see me through a little window, but I didn't know they were there looking at me. And of course, it was tremendous deprivation being taken from my parents at such a young age. And because of that, and my mother was expecting another baby and then turned out to have a heart murmur, so she was difficult to look after. I went to live with my grandmother, who at that time just lived next door to my parents. And I can remember night after night my grandmother holding a hot water bottle above my ear so that the warmth would help to ease the pain. And unfortunately, there were no antibiotics available, so it was an ongoing infection. As I got a bit older, I had to be taken to the clinic every day to have my ears cleaned and horrible stinging drops put into them to try and clear up the infections. And of course, I was partially deaf. One ear was worse than the other. One ear had burst, its eardrum, and that was the worst one. And then the other ear, they sliced through the eardrum in order to let out the material, the pus and so on that was coming out. But anyway, all through my early school time until I was 11 years old, I had to go every day to the clinic to have this treatment. And my grandmother, incredibly, used to go on two buses, one into the centre of Newport and another one up to another bus to where the clinic was, for my treatment. And she did that every weekday until I was 11. And then I passed to the girls' high school, and I could take myself to the clinic because it was nearby the school. But until then, in the junior schools, I think I must have been considered quite stupid because they never tested whether I could hear anything, and I was just allowed to sit on the back row, and I couldn't tell what we were supposed to be doing. I watched the other kids very closely so that I could be just behind them in whatever it was we were told to do. And yes, that was the beginning of my life, was really having to cope with a very considerable hearing defect. And then I suppose in my early married life, in my 20s and early 30s, I managed because I just had a household and the kids are used to making mum here. And then I had the opportunity to go to university. And in fact, we were 6 of us, the first intake of married, mature students that were allowed into Reading University. And I did a degree of English language and literature, and it was wonderful. But I did find that in the seminars and small groups that I was unable to hear what the students were saying, and I felt very much at a disadvantage. So I asked my doctor to refer me to a hearing specialist because I thought there must be a way of dealing with this. Well, he said that he could probably restore my hearing with an ear operation, but unfortunately it was not successful. I had to have another operation to clear all of that out, and then another one to try and restore my hearing, which it did until about 5 years ago, and then it completely went. So I'm now managing with one ear, the right ear, which has Teflon bones in place of the actual ear bones, and a tympanoplasty, which means a graft of the eardrum, so that is working, and that is amplified with a powerful hearing aid. If I take my hearing aid out, I hear absolutely nothing. I go into a silent world. But I will say that in spite of this disability, I've had a most amazing life and done so many things. I became a drama teacher. I've worked in Africa with abused children and women, and set up a school in Lesotho and trained the teachers and started the school up. And so I feel I've been very blessed in spite of the disability. But now that other things have come along, like tinnitus and what's it called, vertigo, that I can't drive any longer and I can't walk very well, very steadily, and I have to have one of those lovely little push-along, three-wheeler push-along things to keep me steady. Something I never thought I'd go to, but here I am and I'm grateful for it. I'm sure that my story is not the only kind of story. Unfortunately, there weren't antibiotics available when I was little, and probably things are not allowed to